Okay, I'm here. So, do I drop it now? What?
Drop the backpack when I say.
Yeah, but I'm
getting close, man.
David King is what one would describe as a titan music mogul. He is a successful billionaire, CEO of Stackin' Hits Record, with a loving family of Pam, his wife, and Trey, his son. He and Trey arrive at the basketball arena for Trey's game practice. Kyle, Trey's best friend, and David's godson runs up to them to greet David, while Coach Fox also walks up to them. Though David is supposed to stay for the game, he gives an excuse of an urgent meeting at the office, promising Trey he'll be present the next day. Outside, Paul, David's driver, and Kyle's father arrives to pick David up. He delivers the contract from Gabe, David's business partner. David wonders what he thinks about it, and Paul says,
"Listen, you either build or destroy, beloved. I think you gotta be a little crazy sometimes in this world to get what you want."
At the office, Luther ushers David inside, but they come across a desperate upcoming artist who begins to sing for David. Upstairs, Larry introduces him to Marisol Cepeda, an upcoming artist hoping to sign in with the record. He then meets up with Patrick, one of the board members, and they begin talking about the company's impending buyout by Stray Dog Enterprises. David says,
"The minute they buy us out, they'll drop all the new artists we've been trying to develop. They'll pimp out our entire catalog for tampons and Viagra commercials. They'll squeeze every drop of black culture and artistic integrity that I spent the last 25 years of my life trying to build."
While Patrick is concerned with the huge amount of money the buyout will bring in, David wonders whether the company cares about their music. To him, there's more to life than just making money. Patrick feels it's time to sell, so David gives him a formal offer, offering to buy out his shares. With his shares, David can control the vote of the board. Besides, it's the same deal Patrick gets with Stray Dog. The biggest mistake David made 5 years ago was selling some parts of Stackin' Hits in the first place. The company has been going downhill ever since, hence the impending buyout. David just wants to take back control by any means possible. After much hesitation, Patrick finally agrees to sell his shares. At home, David shares the news with Pam, telling her he's buying back the record. Though it's just the controlling interest for now, he'll be able to veto the sale. Pam is confused, since he is the one who said the deal was a good move in the first place. Well, his mind has been changed. When he tells her they'll take a loan out on the penthouse, cash out some of their stocks, bonds, and other investments to raise the money for the buy, Pam is not on board. David believes the record will be back on top again when he gets the controlling interest. But Pam feels all this might be a sign to move on to the next chapter. Well, David doesn't want to move on, and he feels life is a risk. She wonders if he still loves the music, pointing out how passionate he was about a new artist or band he discovered when they were still dating. She says,
"I mean, you don't do that anymore. And when you talk about your work, it's always about how the music business has changed or how the internet has made it hard to stay on top of what works, but it is never, ever about the music."
Giving him a kiss, she leaves him at the balcony to answer a call. Unfortunately, it's a call that turns everything from good to bad, as David learns Trey has been kidnapped. Inside, he tells Pam about this, and she is left in disbelief just like him. David calls out for Paul, and he is also perplexed when he hears the news. He tries calling Kyle, but it goes straight to voicemail. David immediately contacts the police. Minutes later, they arrive at the penthouse and begin setting up in the dining room. Afterward, Detective Bridges begins the investigation, with Detective Bell and Detective Higgins by the side. Apparently, the kidnapper gave David instructions on the phone, and David confirms, saying,
$17.5 million in Swiss francs, unmarked 1,000 franc notes, and he'd call us back tonight.
Pam says the kidnapper would get whatever they want as long as they get Trey back unharmed, and David agrees. Bridges mentions the possibility of it being an in-house kidnapping, but David and Pam are sure nobody in the house is involved. Afterward, the team is ready to receive the kidnapper's call, and Bridges tells David to remain calm whenever the call comes in. Well, that's easier said than done. After hearing that some personnel are at the arena, Paul asks Higgins about Kyle, but he rudely gets shut down. Higgins shows Bridges a picture of Trey's headband. It was found outside the basketball arena, and Pam instantly recognizes it as Trey's. Bridges says,
"Higgins, contact Real-Time Crime Center at 1 Police Plaza and ascertain if there are any stills or videos from the vicinity of the LIU basketball arena."
At the arena, Fox recounts everything that happened during practice, although he didn't see when Trey left since there were many kids at the arena. He drops his number, asking the officers to give him a call if anything comes up before they leave. At home, David helplessly watches the news coverage about Trey. Paul gets hounded by the 3 detectives, making the man frustrated. The poor man just wants to go find his own son, but Dillian brings up his parole officer, threatening to call him. Paul is unfazed as he tells them he's off parole, but Higgins just tells him to sit, and they resume their questioning. Afterward, Paul goes to meet David in his office. He feels the media is turning their private life into a circus, but David knows it comes with the territory. Paul reveals he made a call uptown to see if the streets heard anything. He's ready to do anything to help because the family is just like his. Trey is like a son to him, so he can do anything to get him back. Just then, Pam calls out to David and she jumps into his arms, excitedly saying,
They found him and they're bringing him home.
This makes David and Paul extremely happy, and they also share a warm hug. The police convoy arrives, and bystanders video, clap, and cheer for Trey's safe return. Pam runs up to her son and engulfs him in a big hug, thanking God for his safe return. However, there's a problem. Kyle isn't with him. David and Pam usher Trey inside, but Paul is confused about Kyle's whereabouts. The detectives tell him there was a mix-up, and the kidnapper has Kyle instead. Apparently, Kyle was wearing Trey's headband when they left the gym, hence the confusion. Paul isn't hearing any of this, but Bridges also isn't taking any misbehavior from him. Since he isn't being detained, they let him go back inside the house. Afterward, Trey recounts everything that happened, revealing that he and Kyle split up to get food at different places after the game. However, when he returned, he didn't find Kyle. Paul tries asking more questions, but Trey is as confused about the situation as everyone. Pam and David decide to take him to his room so he can rest for the night. Paul is now the one in deep turmoil, but David successfully urges him to cool off inside. Later, Trey tries to confirm from his parents about the ransom payment, but David says,
Well, there's a lot of good people working very hard on this case to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Funny how his narrative has suddenly changed. Now his own son is safe. Just then, the kidnapper calls, and Bridges calls out for David and Pam. After a quick prep, David answers, and lets the kidnapper know he has the wrong kid. Though he knows this, he feels everything is about David. Basically, Kyle's blood will be on David's hand if he doesn't pay. David tries negotiating, telling the kidnapper to let Kyle go, and he'll make sure he's set free. However, he doesn't agree. He wants the cash in a Jordan backpack, or he ends Kyle. David still tries to reason with him, but the kidnapper has passed the reasoning stage. He tells David he'll call the next day with the drop-off details before hanging up. David gets frustrated when he learns the call can't be traced, since it's a burner phone. Later, Paul meets up with David in his office and asks if the kidnapper threatened to end Kyle. His son is everything to him, but David is concerned about the huge amount. Paul promises to pay back, but David knows he's never seen money like that and has no way of paying. When Paul asks,
You don't feel any kind of responsibility here?
David just tells him it's the kidnapper's mistake. Paul points out the fact that he was going to work it out for Trey, and David truthfully admits this. He doesn't know how to make the situation work, but Paul mentions the label. David gets frustrated and begins lamenting about how everyone wants him to pay for different things, hitting different files on the table. He shows Paul a grenade, revealing he's thought about blowing it up many times but couldn't find the strength. He leaves the office in frustration, and Paul also leaves helplessly. Just then, the doorbell rings, and David learns that Patrick is downstairs. He meets up with Patrick and explains the situation. He admits he doesn't think he can pay the money. If he does, their deal will be off, and he'll have to sell off the label. Patrick wonders what people would say when he sacrifices Kyle to buy the record back, but David has no answer. Everything is just complicated at this point. Patrick points out that it doesn't matter to the public. It's just the same scenario when an artist is canceled. When social media finds out he abandoned Kyle, that would automatically be the end of David's career. David just says,
You know how things move so fast right now in the news. I mean, they'll be on to something else next week.
Patrick can't believe what he's hearing. But David is just trying to be practical. Patrick just wants him to do what's right and shakes him before leaving. In their bedroom, David and Pam discuss the consequences of the situation, but she's also now concerned about the money. The two of them have no idea what next step to take, but Pam tells him they'll figure it out together. Meanwhile, Trey goes through social media posts, and he's already being painted black. David comes into his room and apologizes for leaving the game when he promised to stay. Trey doesn't feel it's important, but David assures him that everything he does is for the family. Trey wonders if withholding Kyle's ransom is what's best for everyone, leaving David speechless. He also tells him the media is on fire about the situation. David tells him to ignore it, but Trey can't. It's everywhere, and everyone will think he is the reason his best friend got eliminated. David admits he doesn't know what to do, making Trey angry. He yells and curses at him, telling him to pay the money. However, David isn't putting up with the disrespect. He makes sure to put Trey in check before moving to leave. Trey quietly stops him, saying,
My father, the man with the best ears in the business, but the coldest heart.
That really hits deep. David goes back to his office and begins soliloquizing. He He's really in a fix and doesn't know what to do. A knock is heard, and Bridges comes in. He wonders if David would be okay with telling the kidnapper he'll pay the ransom, stating that it will buy them more time. However, David remains silent as he doesn't know what to say. Bridges gets the hint and moves to leave, but David just tells him to keep negotiating. Later, the family walks up to Paul and Trey reveals they're going to pay the ransom. Paul is in disbelief, but David confirms, giving him a brotherly hug. Paul also hugs Pam and Trey, happy about the situation. The detectives also come in, and David tells them he'll go to the bank the next morning. Bridges assures him they'll bring Kyle home, and the ransom. He urges everyone to rest up for the next day, and David shakes Paul before leaving with his family. Left alone, Paul gives thanks to Allah, crying out in relief. Meanwhile, in a derelict building, poor Kyle is bound and gagged in a bathtub. The next morning, the money is ready and sitting pretty on the table in the exact notes the kidnapper wants. Soon, he calls and David picks up. Going straight to the point, he tells him to board the train at Borough Hall going to Manhattan by 11 a.m. David's to take his phone with him, and the directions will be texted after he arrives. David asks about Kyle, but the kidnapper just says he'll see him in due time. Adding one more thing, he tells David to also put Pam's Cartier bracelet in the bag. Apparently, he's seen it on her wrist on social media. David tries negotiating, saying it's a 15th wedding anniversary gift, but the kidnapper doesn't care and ends the call. Pam quietly puts the bracelet on the table, willing to give it up. With the money packed up, Bridges debriefs everyone, saying,
The ransom will be in a black Jordan brand backpack equipped with tracking device. You can all follow with your iPhones. We track the kidnapper once Mr. King makes a drop, and we swoop in right away.
He'll be with David at all times, while a team covers the rest of the train. There will also be pre-staged RMPS located at various stations. Paul will ride with the other team, and after Kyle has been located and secured, they'll be brought to a location for observation and debriefing. The next priority will be the money. Higgins tells the others to give the family a second, and Pam hugs and kisses David, urging him not to play hero and to come back home. He also hugs Trey and moves to leave. As planned, he rides with Bridges and Bell, while Paul rides in the police car. They arrive at the station, and the three of them board the train. At every stop, more people enter, making David stand. Higgins and the others follow the route through the tracking device. Soon enough, a man begins a chant, and most people on the train follow suit. Turns out it's the National Puerto Rican Day Parade, and the crowd is packed for the concert. The show begins, putting everyone in a frenzy. Inside the train, David gets a call from the kidnapper who says,
Move to the back of the subway car. Go between the cars.
Go between the cars. David is confused, but the kidnapper hurries him up, making him move. Bridges and Bell also follow behind. When he arrives between the cars, the kidnapper instructs him to drop the backpack when he tells him to. Somebody pulls the emergency brake, making the train lurch. Due to this, David loses his balance, and the bag drops. It falls right into the hands of a guy waiting there, and he instantly passes it to another. They've planned this well, and the bag is passed to another guy on a motorbike. He begins moving, but Higgins radios in about the location, following the tracker. Meanwhile, Kyle is brought out to the busy street by two men. Higgins gets frustrated by the number of people blocking his path due to the parade, making the chase slow for him. The bag continues getting switched from one cyclist to another, making Higgins frustrated. It is switched once again, while the band keeps on playing for the parade. Finally, Higgins sees the cyclist with the bag and radios the location. He is soon cornered by police cars, making him fall off his bike. Nevertheless, he begins running and Higgins pursues. Unfortunately, this is just a distraction. By the time Higgins and other officers get to him, Higgins realizes the bag is full of tampons, making him extremely frustrated. Turns out the original was switched at some point. Higgins gets Bridges on the radio, reporting the situation. Meanwhile, Kyle has been dropped off near Yankee Stadium, all beaten and bruised. Later, David arrives back home and tells Pam and Trey about the situation. The NYPD has sent Kyle to the hospital for observation. Pam asks about the money, and David tells her the detective said they're working on it. Trey shows him some posts saying,
You're everywhere. Everybody's calling you a superhero.
Well, this won't bring back the money, and it doesn't make David happy in the slightest bit. At the hospital, Bridges questions Kyle, but Kyle can't say much about the place he was kept. He just knows he smelled some drugs, and there was a lot of rap music. It sounded like it was in another apartment, and the music was something he's never heard. He begins singing it, but Higgins stops him, asking if he remembers anything else. He asks for a break, but the detectives urge him to continue a little more. However, Paul isn't having this and asks them to give Kyle a break. Bridges continues talking like he didn't hear Paul, making him angry. He points out how everyone hurried to tuck Trey in bed when he needed it. He and Bridges begin an argument, but David stops them, urging everyone to take a break. They eventually leave the room, leaving Kyle alone with Paul. The next morning at the company, David gets a visit from Gabe. He's talked to all the creditors, and they greatly admire David's actions, but they don't want to be held responsible. David doesn't understand, making Gabe say,
That viral video, that went global? You dropping $17.5 million from the Ford trade? The deal was contingent on you using that financing to buy back control of Stacking Hits Records.
Unfortunately, the deal is off because of this. David tries telling him he could raise the money, but Gabe says the situation is a breach of contract and even a fraud. The investors want the money back in 2 weeks, and after that, they'll start the collection process. From his penthouse, Sag Harbor home, Basquiat's, and all David's artwork, everything is on the line. He did a good thing by deciding to pay, but at this point, it really doesn't feel good anymore. After Gabe leaves, David puts on his headphones, listening to music and thinking deeply. Some minutes later, his secretary comes in, telling him Patrick and Alex, another board member, are there. David happily tells them he's changed his mind concerning the buyout and is now ready to proceed with the deal. Unfortunately, they've come with their own bad news, and Alex reveals, "I told Stray Dog Enterprises we're out." Alex explains that due to David's heroic actions, the record has gotten back on the front page, and every artist in their catalog has seen a jump in sales. David tries calling Stray Dog himself to correct this, but Alex feels they need to see how this new direction plays out. However, David needs the money immediately, and Alex mentions how ironic it is that he didn't need the money when he was trying to sabotage the deal 2 days ago. Patrick cautions Alex, but David already realizes Patrick told Alex about their discussion. Patrick defends himself, saying he was only trying to protect himself because no one else will in their line of business. Later, David takes a stroll, listening to a song with his headset. It turns out to be the same song Kyle was hearing where he was kidnapped. He rushes to the hospital and interrupts the interrogation. He plays the song for Trey, and Trey instantly confirms it. David reveals the artist's name is Young Felon, and he was on the playlist Trey gave him. He is definitely sure it's the same voice from the phone. Well, he's not known as having the best ears in the business for nothing. Looking at the picture, Paul reveals,
"I think I've seen this clown before. He came up to me once."
Apparently, he wanted to meet David. Although David is sure it could be the kidnapper, the detectives are not on board with this. However, Paul quietly sends a picture of the artist, asking for his identity. The detectives tell David they'll run forensics on the voice recording and even involve AI, urging him to let them continue with Kyle. Left with no choice, David leaves the room. Paul runs up to him, telling him he bets the streets know where to find the artist. Truly, his phone rings just then, and the address is given to him. He and David drive to the location, and Paul takes his loaded gun along as insurance. Paul's contact stays on the lookout for the car, while the two head over to the apartment. A woman carrying a baby answers the door and immediately recognizes David from the viral video. Paul excuses himself to wait in the car while the woman introduces herself as Rosa and invites David in. Turns out Young Felon's real name is Archie, and Rosa tells David he's been at the studio for 2 weeks. She says,
"You're like a god to him. He follows you on social media. He listens to your podcast. He watches all your interviews. He knows everything about you."
She gives him the direction to the studio, and he notices Pam's Cartier bracelet. Rosa shares that Archie got it for her yesterday, and David asks to take a picture of it, lying that he wants to get it for his wife. Rosa happily agrees and admits Archie has been acting weird lately. She feels he's losing hope, which is the only thing he's had for a long time. As they drive to the studio, David asks Paul for the gun, and Paul hands it over. However, he pulls another immediately, surprising David. Well, one street, always street. When they arrive at the building, David goes in while Paul waits behind for his call. David soon locates the studio. Archie is in a session, and David quietly sneaks in, pulling out his gun on the producer. The young man runs out of the room without looking back, while David takes his seat. When he stops the music, Archie is confused but gets really surprised when he sees David through the glass. He wonders if the police are waiting for him, but David tells him he heard his song and that he has potential. Archie feels he has more than that, proudly saying his music is the best in the hood. Besides, he's up $17.5 million now. David asks, "Who taught you to do wrong, B? Who told you you weren't any good? Who broke your heart?" When he asks about his father, it makes Archie angry. David realizes he's a criminal and wonders if Archie wants to be better than him at it, but Archie asks what he wants him to do. Using rap, he demands his money, stating he's packing a gun. However, Archie responds with his own rap, showing his gun. David attacks back, and the two begin a rap battle. When David tells him he isn't a rapper, but a chance giver, Archie feels he's too late. David reveals he's been to his place and has met Rosa and their son, making Archie furious. He asks David what he wants to do, pointing out that they both know where each other lives. However, David just says,
"You're hollow on the inside. You're lonely on the inside. You're quiet on the inside. You hurt on the inside. That's what I want to feel. That's what I want to see. That's what I want to know."
Archie admits he's been dreaming of an audience with David for so long. When he got out of prison, he stood outside Stack and Hit's offices, hoping to meet David. He asks if David hears him now, but David just asks him what they can do now. Archie pulls out his gun and fires before running off. Thankfully, it doesn't hit David, and he follows in hot pursuit. Outside, Paul pulls the car up as Archie comes out, but Archie shoots at him twice before running off. David rushes to Paul and he painfully reveals there's glass in his eye. However, he urges David to run after Archie and get the money. The chase goes all the way to the train station, and after a little hide and seek, they both enter the train at the last minute, though into different cars. David moves through the cars trying to find Archie, but Archie is already on top of the train. When David appears between two cars, Archie attacks from above and the two begin fighting. Archie tries to jump off and end his story, but David holds on to him. Pulling him back, he gives him a much-needed beating, knocking him unconscious. Meanwhile, Belle and Higgins find the money under the bed at Archie's house, while Rosa just looks on in confusion. Poor girl. The next day, the Kings visit Paul at the hospital. David and Paul joke about his one-eye situation, making everyone laugh. David wants him to come back and work with him, but Paul feels it's time to find something new for him and Kyle. David understands and thanks Paul for his help. Trey shows David the Billboard Hot 100 chart, and 4 of the top 10 songs are from the record's artists. When he says,
"It's almost like it's 2004.
Everyone bursts out laughing. Wishing Paul good health, Pam takes the boys outside so the men can have some private time. Smiling, they bump fists together, promising to always be there for each other. Later, the front of the courthouse is packed with protesters chanting for the freedom of Young Thug. Higgins and Belle escort him inside, while he basks in the attention without remorse. Afterward, David arrives, and Bridges tells him Archie's attorney in the DA's office just finished hashing out the details of his plea agreement. Turns out there'll be no trial. He reveals,
The only thing he asked for was to talk to you one more time.
Archie will be getting 25 years, but David feels it's not enough. In prison, Archie's song becomes a top hit. David goes to see him, and Archie boldly tells him he'll let him have the privilege and honor of signing him to Stackin' Hits Records. David can't believe the audacity, but Archie points out that he's now the biggest new streaming artist in the world. He's gotten over 1 billion streams since his arrest. Archie says he's been waiting for this moment his whole life, admitting he wanted to be like David ever since he was a kid. He admits that he had decided to give up on rap. Looking at David in his highest and himself in his lowest, Archie wanted to bring him down with him. Now, every label is chasing him with mind-blowing deals, but he wants to sign with Stackin' Hits. Unfortunately, David reveals he's leaving Stackin' Hits. This surprises Archie, and David explains he's starting his own label, something smaller. He says,
Something I can have more control of, give me more time to spend with my family, but more importantly, or just as importantly, more time to concentrate on the music, to get back to the music.
Archie feels he'll go broke by doing this. Realistically, signing him would be the biggest deal in music history, but David just says all money isn't good money. Archie tries convincing him, but David tells him he's not interested. He feels he can't do anything with Archie's music. It's not for him. This makes Archie furious. He begins swearing and cursing at David, and the officers arrive to drag him back in. Some days later, the Kings set up a meeting with Sula, an upcoming artist Trey has been urging David to listen to. She introduces her pianist and begins singing her piece. It's a lovely, beautiful song, and David is blown away, alongside Pam and Trey. Afterwards, she tells David the name of the song is Highest to Lowest. He asks if she can handle everything that comes with music, and she confirms. David believes her, telling her they'll be hitting the studio the next day. Trey wants his cut, while Pam wants to be co-chairperson of the board of their new label. It could be a family business, and David loves the idea, saying,
Let's get to work.
And that, my friends, is how it ended. If you've made it to the end, hit the like button, comment, and share. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next recap.